The father of Odysseus was Laertes. Despite being the son of King Arceisius and his wife Calcomedusa, Laertes found himself alone on a sun-scorched pile of rock and dust that those who avoided the place called Ithaca. Two tiny islands joined by an umbilical isthmus, scorched tinder dry by unrelenting summer winds, scoured by winter rain of anything not deeply rooted, this hostile rock was home to Laertes. As an ex-Argonaut, it could not be said that Laertes was a man who lacked determination. He was determined to turn his rock of barren earth into a kingdom. Nothing but thorny bushes and brittle trees would grow in this unforgiving environment. So he decided that he would base his wealth on the one commodity this terrain could produce in abundance. Laertes became a pig farmer. Laertes was a good pig farmer. His ability to breed, raise, slaughter, butcher, then preserve the flesh of the pigs of the island brought him notoriety. Neighbours stopped their mocking of him and began to see the sense of his endeavours. Men began to come to him, to bind themselves to him by oath. Laertes could offer them little, but what little he had, he shared with them. In the early days they all lived together and ate together and slept together on the ground, for they had accepted his kingship. Prosperity came, and Laertes built a fortified palace. Next he needed a wife, a queen to help him rule his pigsty kingdom. After considering his options, Laertes married Anticlea. Her father was a local brigand, and few who lived around about dared ask for details of the dowry. Into this breathing world was born Odysseus. A younger sister, Timone, completed the family. Laertes entertained his children through the long winter nights with tales from the old myths and legends. They learned of the myth of Tantalus. They learned of the legend of Pelops, and they learned of the curse of Menelaus. Both children were enthralled by the stories, and each in their own way learned from them a most valuable lesson. For Timone, the use of the lesson led to her securing a good marriage to a good man. For Odysseus, the lesson led, inadvertently, to a long journey. For the years of their childhood and adolescence, nothing happened on Ithaca. Then the world turned. The world changed. News of the death of Castor radiated outward from Sparta. As fast as a merchant ship, a fishing boat, or a pirate vessel could glide through the sea, so spread the news of the untimely death of the son of Tyndareus. Not that anybody was concerned about Castor. It was Helen, the eldest daughter of Tyndareus, who was now the focus of attention, and the great question, who is going to take her, was surpassed only by the greater question, who is going to rule Sparta? Helen, as a young girl, had been abducted by Theseus. Castor had been instrumental in bringing her home unmolested. The situation was now very different and potentially graver. Kings and princes and warriors and anybody who was anybody in the Greek world descended on Sparta, each vying for the hand of the most beautiful woman in the world. Odysseus was amongst them. What set Odysseus apart from the rest was that he had no gift for the king. Odysseus was poor. Odysseus, aware of his poverty, waited until the hall was full of suitors, each showing off their wealth, each loudly proclaiming their suit. Odysseus slunk in and made his way quietly to the back of the hall. Tyndareus, however, seeing the dishevelled figure creep in and, concerned that some ne'er-do-well had entered the congregation in order to make mischief, had the scruffy intruder brought before him. Tyndareus demanded that this unkempt person, tousled and smelling vaguely of pig poo, identify himself and explain what purpose he had for being here on such an important occasion. Odysseus was embarrassed and had, whilst subject to the blustering tirade, stared sullenly at the ground before him. Odysseus considered his response. He took a deep inward breath, looked up, and, about to proclaim himself for the entire congregation to hear, instead stifled his breath. For as Odysseus looked up, the world turned again, and again the world changed. As he looked up, his gaze beheld a woman whose name, Odysseus was soon to learn, was Penelope. Penelope beheld the gaze of Odysseus. In that moment, both knew that neither would love another, and that if it meant dedicating the rest of their lives to the task, they would always be together. The rest of the encounter went by, for Odysseus, in a haze. He later recalls that the audience and the king laughed heartily at what he said. By the time his audience with the king was concluded, however, Odysseus had received and had accepted an invitation to dine at the king's table. Penelope, Odysseus discovered, was the daughter of Tyndareus' brother, Icarius. Every day the furtive couple sought out each other's gaze. Every day Odysseus would place himself at a location just inside the hall where Icarius and his entourage were certain to pass. Each day Odysseus and Penelope gazed into each other's eyes. The torture of the distance between them was alleviated only by these brief, blissful, intimate moments of communion, taken as if stolen, taken as if it were a shameful act, taken because it seemed to both of them that not to do so would bring them into the realization that they were not the arbiters of their own existence, but that their happiness and fulfillment was contrived or denied by the caprice of others. Neither Odysseus nor Penelope were prepared to formulate their lives on such a condition, and both remained alert to the opportunity of changing their situation. Situations do change, and opportunities do appear, although at first situations do not always appear to be opportunities. Often they appear as threats. Odysseus, however, as the son and heir of an ex-Argonaut, could not be said to lack determination, and was blessed with the ability to see a threat as containing an opportunity. The situation that came about was as follows. Atreus, the king of Mycenae, had ambitions for his kingdom. He craved an alliance with his southern neighbour, and was prepared to entwine his family with that of Tyndareus in order to entwine the kingdoms of Mycenae and Sparta. Both sons of Atreus, Agamemnon and Menelaus, had, in their turn, sought marriage with Helen, But Tyndareus was in no hurry to decide in their favour. The house of Atreus bore the curse of Menelaus, and all the assembled guests and suitors knew of what Atreus was capable. Both sons had returned to their home at Mycenae alone. Then news, like a shock of lightning, struck at the heart of the proceedings. Clytemnestra, the younger daughter of Tyndareus, was married to Tantalus, the king of Pisa. She had borne him a son, an heir to his kingdom, and whilst Tantalus ruled from his throne at Pisa, Clytemnestra had opted to remain at her father's house at Sparta. Atreus, unable to wait for Helen to announce her choice of husband, had ordered his eldest son Agamemnon to seek out the husband of Clytemnestra, kill him and their son, and take Clytemnestra as his wife. Agamemnon arrived at the hall of Tyndareus and demanded the young widow as his bride. Tyndareus was reluctant to accept such a blood-stained union, but Clytemnestra stepped forward and proposed to Agamemnon the following condition. She would marry him if, in his absence, she would rule as his queen. No woman had ever before demanded a condition concerning her own marriage. No woman had ever before addressed before such a court as this her own ambitions. The court held its collective breath. Agamemnon said yes. The marriage was settled, and Clytemnestra went to Mycenae with Agamemnon. Tyndareus understood that Menelaus was now a good prospect, but that the fragility of human existence was such that anything could happen to the house of Atreus, and not necessarily to its benefit. Tyndareus continued to wait. Then suddenly, without warning, Atreus fell to the blade of an assassin. Agamemnon ascended the throne of Mycenae with Clytemnestra as his queen, and Menelaus was now the best prospect for Helen's husband. Supported by his brother, Menelaus would be the unquestioned ruler of Sparta, with the most beautiful woman in the world warming his bed. Tyndareus knew that, as far as the rival suitors were concerned, Menelaus would be the unpopular choice. They would argue that Menelaus was chosen because of the murderous cruelty of his father and his brother, and that Tyndareus was intimidated by the power of this neighbouring cursed clan. If, through disappointment at not being chosen, the failed suitors were to strike out at the chosen one, then a war of all against all could threaten the existence of the fledgling kingdoms of the entire region. Whispers of murder would soon haunt the Spartan hall, and Tyndareus realised that, to make the marriage acceptable to all the other kings and warriors of the Greek world, he needed a strategy. Odysseus had an idea. Odysseus went to Tyndareus and proposed a deal. If, Odysseus suggested, Tyndareus would arrange a marriage between himself and Penelope, Odysseus would reveal how Tyndareus could secure the acceptance of Menelaus as the husband of Helen and the future king of Sparta without bloodshed. Tyndareus agreed. Tyndareus sent word to all the suitors that Helen was ready to announce her choice. The suitors congregated in the hall at Sparta, except for Menelaus, who was represented by Agamemnon. Before Helen made her announcement, it was proposed that every suitor was to make a sacred oath that, if they were not chosen, they would support the choice of Helen by taking up arms against any who sought to upset the marriage. After every suitor swore the oath, Helen announced her choice. The wedding of Menelaus to Helen was celebrated throughout the Greek world. Nobody sought to harm Menelaus, nor to interrupt the proceedings. The question of Spartan rule was successfully settled, and the stability of the region was reinforced. Odysseus and Penelope were married and arrived at Ithaca prepared to live happily ever after. Odysseus' idea, the Oath of the Suitors, created a win-win situation. Tyndareus had his inheritance settled. Agamemnon and Clytemnestra were enthroned at Mycenae. Menelaus and Helen were heirs to Sparta. Odysseus and Penelope were happy. The whole of the Greek world was calm, settled, and at peace. What could possibly go wrong?